Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our blower motor. This is going to be very easily accessed from underneath the passenger's side dash. Let's use a flat screwdriver, and we're going to carefully come along the driver's side of the connector itself. I just want to get inside the groove, and I'm going to gently pry. As I'm prying this, I'm pulling it away, and once it's apart, I want to give it a close inspection. If you see any funny colors, it's probably corrosion, and it would need to be dealt with. Ours looks fine, so I'll set it aside. The next thing you're going to need to have is a box cutter or a razor blade. Now, of course, you're going to want to be very careful with this. Make sure you're wearing hand and eye protection at all times. The area that we're going to need to use this is right inside the blower motor box. If you were to look up inside this area, you're going to find you have a groove that comes all the way around. We're going to have to go ahead and trim that so we can take down this entire unit before we can continue. A razor blade like this will work perfectly. But if you happen to have one of these butane torches with a cutting blade on it, it's going to be a little bit easier for you. As you look along the ring here, if I was to stick a screwdriver in, I can find the groove, and then I'm going to find areas that the groove goes away, and then comes right back again. The areas that the groove goes away is the area that you need to cut. We're just going to make our way all the way around this. Now, as I'm coming around, I noticed that the wiring's a little bit close. I don't want to risk damaging it, so I'm going to carefully grab onto it and try to pull it down and away. There we are. There's our little connector. We can try to set this aside, give ourselves a little bit more room in the area. Now we'll continue cutting. Getting pretty close at this point, looking good. Now sometimes you might have to use a mirror for this so you can see a little bit easier. It does get a little bit tight along the back side. If you're using a tool like this, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. You don't need to be breathing in all these fumes. There we are. Now that we have that broken free, we can get this over to the bench. At this point, we have the blower motor assembly on the bench. We need to continue by removing this area from the blower motor. Looking along the area that would be considered the bottom side of it, you're going to find that you have two plastic rivets that you need to drill out. To start, I'll use a 3/8 drill bit. That side's nice and loose. Let's carefully lift up on this cover. I'll just give that a quick inspection. And now I can set this aside. Let's move along to removing the two mounting nuts that you can see inside this area. For these, I'm going to use a 7mm socket. Now let's carefully grab onto this cover while holding the blower motor cage. Now we can start separating the blower motor from this area. This is going to be very easily done using a prying device. I'm going to carefully get in between the cage and the housing. As I start separating this, you're going to see that you have the studs coming down and out. Just go ahead and lift that right up off of there. Give this a thorough inspection because you will be reusing it. There it is, friends. Okay, friends, let's have a close look at our brand new blower motor. You want to make a quick comparison to the original. You're going to notice that it's the exact same thing. Now let's continue on by grabbing our assembly here. With this in our hand, the area that you want to pay attention to is the area where the connector is supposed to go through. If you were to look underneath it, you can see exactly the slot that this needs to line up with. As you have those two areas lined up, you're going to find that the two studs also line up with their corresponding holes. Now with that said, let's continue on by sliding this down and into position. Let's just have a look under here, make sure it looks like it's lining up perfectly. Assuming it is, we can go ahead and flip it back up and we'll gently start pressing this down. Let's have a look inside each of the holes. Make sure that both of the studs are protruding as they should. Once you have both of them in place, continue on with your mounting nuts. I'm just going to put this right on a magnet and I'll see if I can at least get it started. All right, let's bottom them out and snug them. Now we're at the point we can reinstall our cover. Let's take this and put it in place. Now you want to make sure both of your mounting bolt holes are lined up. After that, go ahead and find yourself 2 coarse threaded screws that'll fit inside this hole. Start this in by hand. Myself a thread or 2. Before I make that tight, I'll do the same thing to the other one. Okay, now we can go ahead and snug both. Now that we have both screws in there, you want to have a look inside of the electrical connector port. You need to make sure that the screw that you decided to use did not protrude down inside this hole. Ours looks fine. Now I can rest this. At this point, you'll notice in your kit, it comes with this. This is an adapter ring. We're just going to take this, and what we need to do is line up all of our inside holes with the holes of the blower motor. If it doesn't seem like they line up on your first try, just try to give it a little spin and try again. The holes are a little oblonged and it really only fits one way. Also in your kit, you're going to find it came with 6 little mounting bolts. We're going to be using 3 of these right now. Let's go ahead and put these 3 inside of each of the mounting holes that we just lined up with our bracket. Obviously, before we continue tightening it, we want to make sure we start the other 2. Okay, snug them up. Now let's get back over to the vehicle. Let's get this in place. You remember when we were removing the blower motor, the connector was facing straight back towards us. Now, of course, you're going to want to line up your other 3 bolt holes. They should line up perfectly. Start them all in, and then snug them up. I'm not going to make them too tight, but I do want to try to hold the blower motor up. Now I can continue on to the far rear. Now, this one's a little bit harder to reach. Okay, all 3 of them are started. We can snug them up. Keep in mind, you're only screwing into plastic. You don't want to strip anything out. There we are. Go ahead and grab onto that blower motor and try to pull it out of the dash. Oh yeah, that's nice and tight. Now it's time for the electrical connector. Let's reattach that. Listen for a click, give it a tug. You remember when we were dealing with this? We went ahead and took this down. Make sure you re-secure it. Get this in place, listen for a couple clicks, give it a tug. It's not hanging down. All right, now's a great time to just double check everything. We made sure that we secured all of our mounting bolts, it's completely plugged in, and none of the wiring's hanging down. Lastly, go ahead and put your key in the on position and test your blower motor on all speeds. Thanks for watching.